What do you think? You think it's America first to militarily intervene in Iran?
Yeah. So first, let me address the four categories that you laid out, or I guess Bobby laid out. I think there's more than four categories. I think that does not include everyone, myself very much included. And I think you just identified as well as someone who doesn't quite, fit into the four box matrix that he presented. I am certainly not someone who says Donald Trump is always right. Much to the chagrin of much of my own audience. And I hear from them from time to time when I say that I think he's wrong. And I'm not bashful about saying it. I think my job is to tell the truth as I see it, to give my opinion and not tell people exactly what they want to hear. So sometimes that involves criticizing anyone, including the president of the United States. I'm also not a Trump hater or one of these, reflexive, he's a criminal, he's horrible, impeachment. I'm definitely not the resistance either. I think that Trump is often right, but not always. And when it comes to Israel, I think Israel is usually right, but not always. I think compared to that neighborhood and people in the region, I think Israel is by far our greatest ally, sharing our values the most, doing a lot of our dirty work, frankly, which is what they're doing right now in Iran and have been doing for many years. They're great on intelligence. They sort of keep an eye on some very dangerous characters in that part of the world who want to kill us more than they want to even kill them. So I'm very, very strongly pro-Israel, but no one is above reproach, not Benjamin Netanyahu, not the Israeli government. And when they do something wrong, often they admit it, by the way, and apologize. But I'm not someone who's like, oh, it's Israel or no matter what all the time, or you're an anti-Semite. So I don't quite buy into that foursquare. But I understand it's sort of useful as a framework for having these conversations. Then the America First question. Look, I think that President Trump has asserted that he's the one who decides what counts as America First. I know there are some people within the movement who say, well, no, it's actually not all up to one person. A lot of his supporters say, well, to some extent, he is the leader of the movement. So if he says this, we're inclined to follow in that direction. I happen to agree with him here, right? We're not talking about, I think it's a category error for people to say, well, it's warmongering to talk about this potential intervention, and we're tired of these forever wars. The forever war, in this case, is being waged and has been waged by Iran. They have been killing our people, Americans, for decades. Decades. I think that would qualify as a forever war. They have repeatedly tried to kill Trump himself. They have active assassination plots against other American officials that they hate for various reasons. And so I think to say, with the Israelis taking the lead, what they've been able to pull off militarily, and especially with their intelligence, to me is just a breathtaking triumph against their existential enemy that doesn't just say death to Israel and death to America. They mean it, and they've taken steps in that direction. They said, if those guys get a nuclear weapon, we are toast, and we literally cannot let that happen and continue to exist as a Jewish state. So they take it immediately, extremely seriously, and they're doing almost all of the heavy lifting. If the warmongering in this case is for the United States to come in with a technology that only we have, with a certain type of bomber and a certain type of bomb, with total air superiority, with the assistance of the Israelis who have taken over the skies of Iran, at this point with no resistance because Iran can't anymore. If that means flying 2 sorties over Fordo in that mountain, that facility that we know exists, and doing the bunker busters twice and then leaving, to me, that's not a war. It's an act of war. It is certainly a military intervention, but it is not this category of saying, oh, it's Iraq again. We're going to send tens of thousands of troops in to occupy the place and try to build a thriving democracy out of Iraq. No one is talking about that. No one supports that. Certainly, Donald Trump does not support that. And the last point I'll make is it kind of reminds me of Soleimani. The Soleimani hit during the first Trump administration. It was an act of war. It was a military intervention to take out someone extremely dangerous in the Iranian regime. Trump did it. He didn't apologize. And then he dropped the mic and walked away, and we didn't escalate into something else. I think that would be the model. If he makes the choice to bomb Fordo, he'd say, here are the 4 corners of what we're willing to do. We're going to do that in our interest because we have the technology, and that's it. I think that's something that an awful lot of Americans would support, and based on your criteria, would check both of those boxes for America First.
Okay. I want to walk through a few of these elements and then also play devil's advocate. First, America First is a prospect. It's a premise. It's a concept that did pre-exist Donald Trump. He said that he invented it, but it did pre-exist Donald Trump. That being said, I do think that America First largely today rests upon the decisions of Donald Trump. What I mean by that is it's not ideological. It doesn't have a coherent set of principles. It's rather pragmatic. And that pragmatism is grounded in making choices and making deals and running through analysis of the prism of whether or not we're making decisions that's best for America. He was a democratically elected president whose entire political career seems to reflect he's earned the benefit of the doubt that is how he actually goes about making decisions. He's not at capture of Lindsey Graham or neocons, nor do I think he is compromised by Israeli intelligence, nor do I think it's clear now is the case that he's beholden to the more pacifist or isolationist wing of MAGA as well. He's simply a consequentialist. He's a pragmatist. He is a strategy-based man. And I do believe, therefore, he defines, appropriately so, America first. I trust he'll make these decisions adhering to what we're asking for. Think of our interests first. So I want to set that little bit of sort of history and analysis behind us now. I do want to ask you a couple of devil's advocacy questions. First,
what is the population of Iran?
93 million. Famous now reference to a conversation taking place between Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz, which is up today at the Tucker Carlson Network, which you can watch and making its way virally across your social media stream. But I do want to ask you a couple devil's advocacy questions. And I have to ask myself some consistency-based questions on this front, Guy. Thomas Massie, I believe also AOC, have joined together to say, whoa, war is supposed to be an act of Congress. I don't think they are without merit. Are we then going to, in response, say and play the game of what is war? Like B-2 bombers dropping bunker busters just on 2 sorties isn't actually war? Like, what is the deal? And I understand that's quaint now, Congress declaring war. It's been what, 70 years? I don't know how long it's been in the last action where we had a declaration of Congress. But are we just going to resign that to the dustbin of history at this point, requiring Congress to sign off on war?
Yeah, well, I think it's a more legitimate and consistent question or criticism from Massey than it is from the squad people who are conveniently signing up with him on this. They don't like Trump, and they actually kind of like our enemies. I mean, let's just be clear. They do not want us taking any action against our enemies in the Middle East. I think some of them are highly sympathetic to some of those enemies, actually, and they don't care at all about the Constitution or the constitutionality of presidential action. If it's some left-wing president trampling the Constitution blatantly to expand the government or do left-wing things, they're all for it and don't care at all. So I'm not interested in them. Massey at least has some consistency there. I'm not a constitutional scholar. I have read different perspectives on this. I'm pretty persuaded that the commander-in-chief has very broad latitude, especially for like surgical actions that are not a declaration of war against an entire foreign country where now we are like formally at war with them, boots on the ground, that sort of thing. Well, I think, we've had presidents for a long time, long time have not run to Congress.
I do think it's a little bit academic. I do think it's a little academic on like what is war. Let's put it this side. Put it this side. Well, but it's not for the Iranians. I mean, the minute the bombs start dropping, they're not too concerned about what has been signed or what the definition of. I'm sure it feels like war.
Yeah, well, they've been waging war on us for decades. As I said, they've been killing as many of us as they possibly can for decades. So the regime, I'm separating them, of course, out.
Which you would hope would be persuasive for Congress. Which you would hope would be persuasive evidence for Congress and shouldn't be that hard. But you and I both know it probably wouldn't pass Congress.
I don't know. I think first of all, I'm not persuaded that a president has to run to Congress for permission for a bombing run. Right? I think if we're going to do a full war like we had in Iraq or Afghanistan, where there were votes, right? We had voted to go into Iraq with a much more controversial invasion without a direct tie to 9/11. I think if they put it up for a vote, just up or down, can we send the B-2 bombers to take out this facility, yes or no? I think that would pass. I think Republicans would pass it. And I think some Democrats would pass it. There'd be a coalition of no, mostly Democrats, some Republicans. I think it would pass. It's an interesting conversation for us to have. Again, I believe you're a lawyer. I'm not. I have read national security and legal experts who I trust, who I respect, who would say this is the type of thing that you would not need congressional approval for this type of action. That might be right. It might be wrong. But to a point that you made,
I think it's a conversation, Guy, we should be having. I think even if it's to this level, let's not let that fall to the dust. Should. I just don't think that should be a calculation that is lost to the dustbin of history. I just don't think it should be. And if there's a legal argument to your point, then let's hear it. And I'm willing and I'm open-minded to hear that. Hold on. Okay, one more piece of devil's advocacy. You know from my introduction that I believe that the limited action supports the analysis of America first. But I will tell you, Guy, I have a ton of humility. I might have more than you on this in that, and if I'm being an open book on this, do I have suspicions that the Iranian population is different than the Afghan population and the Iraq population? Yes, of course I do. Do I have a suspicion the Iranian population is not just willing, but interested in a different form of government? Yeah, I'm inclined to believe that to be the case. But I have a great amount of humility because I think we are talking about regime change. That's what we're talking about. And I really don't have a lot of tolerance for minutia of conversations that acts like we're not. We are. The Israelis do. And that's what, if the goal is to denuclearize Iran, really the prospect of the Ayatollah coming back, because they don't trust him, and he said he wants it, and all these things, he's got to go. That's the underwritten conversation is. So my point, though, is humility on what comes next. It may, and it's more than may, probably be a lot better than what we have now. But let's be a little careful after the lessons of Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya and Syria.
So just real quick, one other thing on the going to Congress and the authorization, because I want to make this point. I think it is an important conversation to have. The Constitution matters. I also think so does precedent. And we've now had how many presidents consecutively who have not had to go to Congress when they go off and drop bombs? You might say they should have, but they didn't. And I just don't know, do we need to now go back to the drawing board for Donald Trump specifically? All these other presidents can do it without congressional approval, but Trump, like we need to uproot more norms yet again at the expense of President Trump. I don't necessarily agree with that, although I agree with your underlying point. It should always be a question about whether there's constitutional authorizations to do anything in government, especially big things like dropping bombs on a foreign land, even if it's fully justified. In terms of the what comes next humility, I'd make two points. One less direct, one more direct to what you've asked. The first one is, I think what a lot of people liked about Trump, and he campaigned on this, was he said, in my first term, no new wars. We didn't get America entangled in any sort of brand new war. And that resonated with a lot of people and they liked it. I would point out, though, it's important to remember, he took out Syrian assets. He took out Soleimani. He took out ISIS in a major way. We did a lot of military stuff under Donald Trump in the first term, I think all of which benefited the United States of America, and none of which spiraled into a wider war with boots on the ground. He has, I think, an ability to draw a line in the sand and say, this is what benefits us, and we're not going further than that. So I think that builds his credibility on this question for people who are worried that it might spiral. I think he is aware of that and his own track record. No one, when he said, I didn't start any new wars in the first term, no one's like, you're a liar because of all these examples. They thought back to the examples, approved of what he did, and also acknowledged it was not starting a new war. I think that's what we're looking at here. I think that's an important point to make. And then finally, on this humility point, yes, I think anyone who's lived in a post 9/11 experience, or go back to Vietnam, right? A lot of humility about not being absolutely sure what's going to happen is in order. I think a lot of the people, by the way, who have been dead set against any attacks on Iran, including what Israel has already achieved, they made all sorts of predictions very confidently about the parade of disasters that would ensue if this happened. And at least so far, every single one of them has been wrong. All of them have been wrong. Right. So I think there's humility in both directions required here, not just the warmonger or the pacifist. A lot of people can guess what might happen. No one knows for sure. I do think that Iran's population, the Persians, are much more pro-Western than a lot of places in the Middle East. There's a long history to support that. Now, could things have changed, over since 1979 and the population been totally indoctrinated? Sure. Of course, we know a lot of the population despises that regime. So you're right. I do think that it's fair to ask the question, what would come next?
And I know you have a heart out in just a few moments. I want to run one more topic by you, which we can do quickly. But I just want to say this because you've brought it up a couple of times. You've referenced the Tucker Carlson, Ted Cruz conversation, which I have not seen in its entirety.
Only once.
But I did see.
Once.
I did see a clip of Ted Cruz. And I bring this up because I want to tie a button on this, because to me, I mean this, like, all that matters to me is, does it serve the interest of America? Ted Cruz makes a biblical argument. We did see an argument made by Mike Huckabee. There was some text release the other day of him sending Donald Trump, a biblical argument for the support of Israel. And I know there's a lot of people listening that believe this to be the case as well. And there's Benjamin Netanyahu out there saying, I understand America first. I don't understand America dead. Today, Tel Aviv, tomorrow, New York. These, to me, are not the appeals that resonate in making a decision that serves America first. I don't need to be scared into action. And I don't really, in this case, believe it should be something that is informed by someone's interpretation of the Bible. For me, this is cold. This is strategic. This is self-interested. It is, hey, I'm the American taxpayer. I pay money to my government. I elect representatives to represent the interest of Americans. And I think you can walk and chew gum at the same time, so you can focus on the border and crime and fentanyl and also have a foreign policy. But I always want to know that you have my interests in mind, not Israel's, not Qatar's, not Washington, D.C.'s, not anyone's, but that of the American people.
Yeah. And so I think actually, a lot of the time, Israel's interests are our interests because of the amount of intelligence and sort of nasty, dirty work that we don't want to do. We don't want boots on the ground. We've got pretty low tolerance for that. Israel's willing to do that type of work. So, and by the way, there's also hundreds of thousands of Americans who live in Israel. So to point that out. I also think, just broadly speaking, a regime that chants on a daily basis death to America, it's almost like the animating chant of their entire regime. To prevent that regime from getting nuclear weapons and from continuing to develop a long-range missile program, that seems to be, at least to me, the textbook definition of what is in the interest of the United States of America. If the United States has the ability, with very high probability of success and low probability for any casualties at all in this limited mission over the skies of Iran, if we're able to take out their nuclear program and basically put an end to their military designs in one fell swoop, that seems like America first, American interest to a T. Some people might disagree, but that's my read on it.
Okay, I want to be respectful of your time. I would love to play you one piece of sound and get your reaction. I think you're the perfect person to listen to this. Terry Moran, I believe, on the Bulwark podcast. He's a former ABC News reporter fired with the Bulwark.
My own feeling is you don't sacrifice your citizenship as journalism, and your job is not to be objective. There is no Mount Olympus of objectivity where a Mandarin class of wise people have no feelings about what their society. We're all in this together. What you have to be is fair and accurate. And I would refer to the interview with the president that I did, or a lot of my work. And I would also say that this, while very hot, is an observation, a description that is accurate and true.
Here's my hot take, Guy. I agree with Terry Moran. I don't think there is an Mount Olympus of apostles that sit atop and have achieved and demand of others objectivity. I actually agree with this. Yeah. I just disagree when he says he is somehow an arbiter of truth and fairness. I don't think he is that. But at least I know what he thinks. My job is not to pretend to my audience that I am objective. It is to strive for accuracy and truth and to be honest with my audience. What do you think, Guy?
Well, the thing is, they pretend to be objective. That's the problem, right? And so when this all happened, I was on Outnumbered on the news channel that day when it all went down. And I said, I actually really love the fact, and I hope journalists continue to post their true feelings on social media, because it gives us a window into knowing exactly who they are and what they think, right? They have this whole air of superiority and how deeply objective they are, and they're just down the line journalists doing their job. And then when they spout off in these clearly partisan screeds on social media, it's like, well, we can see you, we can read what you're saying, and then when you have, you know, your nice hair and your nice suit on ABC News, pretending like you're something else, we know that that is, you know, some sort of a facade. We know what you actually think. I think it's actually honest for them to come out. And
Agreed.
I would respect it more if they were like, hello, everyone. I'm a card carrying liberal Democrat. I agree with the Democrats. I vote for the Democrats. I hate Donald Trump. I hate Stephen Miller. I support illegal immigration, whatever the list might be. Because I know John Harwood has a new piece, the same exact thing. And he's one of the biggest left-wing hacks out there, who is a mainstream journalist for a long time. If they just came out and said, yeah, I'm on Team Blue, and you can take my reporting and analysis, you know, with that grain of salt, that's what you and I do. I think there's like there's transparency there. I prefer that to the supercilious condescension of claimed objectivity and neutrality, when in fact they're a bunch of, you know, hatchet men partisans. Just tell us the truth about who you are and what you believe, and let the chips fall. I think that's a lot better than the model that a lot of them are trying to pretend to be a part of.